Republican North Texas Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th Congressional District. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Sure, thanks. Great to be here.
So let's start with Doge, the Elon Musk effort to cut federal spending. The website for Doge says that they're up to $65 billion in savings. What's your thought on that? And isn't it really just a kick in the bucket, if you will, on how much the government would need to cut in order to bring the debt down?
Well, I think to be fair, the fact that this administration has taken office 5 weeks ago, and if they found what is 65 billion or so, that's a good rate of return. If they continue to perform this way, I think it will accelerate, though, quite frankly. And it's just about, do people really believe that the federal government is working at maximum efficiency? Because if you do, I can sell you a bridge in Brooklyn, and I think those folks are in orbit around Neptune. And so we're looking for cost savings. And if somebody's not doing, I do think, honestly, as well, that the federal workforce has grown over time to far larger than it actually needs to be. And that's what we're trying to do, is simply identify folks that are really working hard for the taxpayer, and those that aren't, or the jobs that just aren't needed, are going to be cut. Because I'll tell you something, we have been here for 4 years, and it doesn't matter what industry that people that come into our office and talk to us, the one thing they have in common is they're starving for labor. So there's loads of jobs and opportunity out there in the private sector. So it's not as if these folks that are let go don't have options. They have plenty of them.
So let me ask you, because the Democrats are describing all this as chaos and
Mhm.
they've been pushing back, what do you say to them?
Well, of course they're going to say that. That's power politics in Washington, D.C. It's unfortunate because Doe should be bipartisan. They should be working with us hand in hand to try to get a maximum bang for that taxpayer buck. But the skeptic in me says, and the pessimist in me says, well, considering that if you look at, say, for instance, USAID employees that gave politically 90, I think it was 96% were given to Democrats. And if you look across the board, it's a very similar number for federal employees as a whole. So this has become kind of a class of workforce that the Democrats simply protect and coddle. So for one reason, tactically, is to ensure that Virginia stays a blue state. And I don't ever want to do that. And if you're going to work for the federal government, do your job. That's all that I'm after. I quite frankly think that this is the administration leading Doge, and they spearheaded Elon Musk to run it for him. And the other thing that I find disgusting is the Democrats' attempt to demonize Elon Musk. He was just fine 3, 4 years ago when he wasn't political or he was leaning left. Now suddenly he's the devil because he supports President Trump and a lean federal workforce. I think let's see what the recommendations come back at, and I'm going to look at facts and I'm going to look at data and then make a decision of how to proceed and what I can support.
Isn't Congress going to be the ones, though, that really have to cut cut back on the federal spending aside from the administration, which, if you look at it, is easier said than done?
Congress has been funding a bloated federal workforce for not years, but decades. And shame on them. And we have to do far better. So I think that's a fair question to ask. But the administration, it's very constitutional. I mean, the power rests in the commander in chief. And so if he wants to cut, he should be able to fire any federal worker. He's the president. That's why people elect him. And if he goes rogue, then people won't reelect him or throw his party out of power. Otherwise, because right now, really what it is, it's the bureaucracies running the country. Let's say, for instance, when a Republican wins and they appoint 15 or 20 or 30 political appointees to an agency of 70,000 people, how much can they really change if the bureaucracy says, well, I'm just not going to follow executive orders. I'm just not going to follow the policy from the commander in chief. I mean, not much. And they shouldn't be political. Unfortunately, they've become so.
A lot of this is taking place as Republicans in the House and the Senate are putting together a reconciliation package to get President Trump's agenda passed. And so we're talking about border security, we're talking about energy policy, we're talking about tax cuts, making permanent the Trump tax cuts from 2017. And I'm wondering, I know you voted for it. Um, Tell me, how quickly is this going to come together? Because there's this disagreement with Senate Republicans over one bill or two bills. So, talk to me a little bit about this.
Well, the president wants one big, beautiful bill, as he says, and the House is walking hand in hand. They agree. And what we did this week is we kicked off the process, and the speaker is then to talk about fine tuning the details. Are going to go to the committee, and the committee is going to come up with a package and then put it all together that we'll vote on. Probably, as far as the timeline goes, probably looking like April. And reconciliation is the one chance you have to pass something with simple majority. Yeah, the House operates that way all the time, but with the Senate, you don't have the filibuster rule applying to reconciliation. So you just need, 51 votes and not 60. So it's very important that we get this right because the American people spoke in November. They elected President Trump. They elected unified Republican government. And now we have to perform for them. We need to rein in spending and we need to work towards reducing the debt to GDP ratio. Otherwise, I mean, the debt's unsustainable now, Jack. I mean, we're talking about spending more on interest this year than the entire military budget. Interest of about $1 trillion, which I find ironic because the Democrats don't want any cuts or even cuts to the rate of growth. And yet, if we hit at some point, we will, there'll be a day of fiscal and financial reckoning where we don't have the money to fund the programs they want and we hit austerity. And then none of these programs, or very few of them, will ever be able to be the size that they are and in the scope. So it's something that we should be addressing now for the well-being of the country in the future.
And what do you say to Democrats who say this is just President Trump and Republicans helping out billionaires at the expense of those in the working and middle class?
First thing I say, one word, yawn, again with the class warfare. If we extend the Trump tax cuts from 2017, 91% of American taxpayers are going to enjoy savings because if we don't, those 91% are going to be paying more in taxes. That's another, the demonization of billionaires. So if your net worth is more than 1,000 millions, suddenly you're evil. You're damn successful is what you are. I don't envy those people. I admire them. My mama taught me there's always going to be somebody taller than you, better looking than you, and richer than you. It's not about you versus them. It's about you versus what you did yesterday. And if you're going to improve. So I find that to be very, really just not constructive at all. And it's lazy. And it gets nobody anywhere. The jealousy is not going to be, you're never going to live your full life if you're worried about what somebody else is doing.
The president campaigned on no tax on tips, no
Mhm.
tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. I've read where the resolution that was approved by the House is not going to include all that. Is that accurate, or what's your take?
I think that again, what we did this week is just kickstarting it. The details will be fine tuned over the next coming weeks and months. I do believe, because we've talked about it in conference, that we are going to do something with no tax on tips. Now, will it be all? Will it be up to unlimited, or will it be limited to say the first $30,000 or $40,000 that's made on tips? Which will, by the way, most service people in the service industry that would cover, if not all of their tips, certainly the bulk of them, and it would be a heck of a lot better than what they are doing now, which is they're getting taxed on it all. So he's going to follow through on his promises. And I'll tell you something that resonated with people anywhere and everywhere I went. When I was talking to somebody in the service industry, they were like, yeah, we love that. And most of them probably weren't traditional Republican voters, and they became that because President Trump had a very good idea. So we are going to fulfill, I think anyway, that promise to some degree on all three counts.
I was just going to say, yeah, what about Social Security and overtime? You think that
Yeah,
will be
I think the
included?
same. And will it be unlimited? Honestly, probably not, but there will be something, and it would be a lot better than it is right now.
One thing that Democrats have been expressing a lot of concern about is cuts to Medicaid. And from what I read in the resolution, $888 billion over a 10-year period in Medicaid would be cut. I know the president says he wants to protect Medicaid, but I think from what I've read, he's okay with work requirements for able-bodied people
Mhm.
and perhaps giving the states block grants as opposed to just matching, dollar for dollar. What can you tell me about that?
Well, the resolution never uses the word Medicaid. That's first thing. Second thing is, I was just down in Austin last week talking to the inspector general and the folks that work to expose fraud within the entitlement programs, particularly Medicaid, because it's the one that's really the most egregious. And these are professionals that have been doing this job for over one fellow over a quarter of a century. And I asked him, of the roughly $50 billion that Texas spends on entitlements, how much of that is fraudulent? People that are receiving benefits that shouldn't, or criminal organizations, or just crooks that are stealing money and lying. And he said up to 20%, definitely more than 10%. And so they were recovering hundreds of millions of dollars every year. But he said they just scratched the surface because they need more people. And every dollar that the state, at least in Texas, spends on enforcement and exposing this fraud, they get $5.44 back. So that's money well spent. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what we're after. Those aren't cuts to Medicaid. Those are exposing fraud, a waste, and abuse. And if you're talking in Texas, let's say it is 20%, that's $10 billion of savings just there. So and if you extrapolate those numbers, I think it's way more than 800 million over a decade. And nobody is harmed there, just the crooks.
So you're saying the effort is really to root out, because we always hear, get rid of the waste, fraud, abuse, and then we never hear anything about it. So you think that's really where the savings are, not so much of kicking people off the rolls?
Yeah, well, we'll kick people off the rolls that don't qualify. I mean, so much of this has been the honor system, just saying, "Oh, we trust you." And we all have anecdotal stories of folks that are on paper on the poverty line. At least I do, and that I know are making $280,000 a year because they have side hustles they're not reporting, things like that. And most of the time, because I did ask, how do you find most of this fraud? It's overwhelmingly from whistleblowers. And there is an incentive because whistleblowers do get a percentage of anything recovered. And also the states, the federal government gets some back, but the states do as well. So we really need to focus on that. And you're right, people talk about it because it's good political fodder and rhetoric to say in a campaign, we have to root out fraud, waste, and abuse, but you have to do something about it. You have to take action. And that's what Doge, President Trump, and Elon Musk is doing. They're spearheading action. They're painting with bold colors, not soft pastels.
Governor Abbott has requested that Congress reimburse the state $11.1 billion for all the efforts to secure the border during the Biden administration. How confident are you that that's going to get across the finish line? And what are other members from other states telling you? Do they support this?
So first off, I filed similar legislation a few years back, and it unfortunately didn't cross the finish line. But now there's really momentum. Governor Abbott came, Senator Cruz and Cornyn met with all the Republican members of the House, and we had a good discussion. And what we, not betraying any sources, but certain people in the process from the appropriations to the finish line that aren't from Texas, they're not Texans, but they are supportive, and that was a bit surprising to me because it would be going to Texas, but they understand and they're sympathetic with the fact that we bore the brunt of unchecked illegal migration. And you see the drastic numbers. I mean, if anybody voted for President Trump and was hesitant and say, is this going to be more of the same? Is this going to be some uniparty thing? Or is there going to be some differences made? With immigration in the last 5 weeks, we have gone from the worst month we've ever had in our history in December of 2023, 304,000 illegal encounters. February is not over yet, but I would project that there will go down. This month will be probably 10,000 illegal crossings the entire month. They've been reduced by over 95%. So he is taking those bold actions that he promised on the campaign trail.
And my last question to you is just about, I know there was a subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee, which you're on the main committee, and I know you're not on the subcommittee, but this discussion of weaponization by the Justice Department. How important is this? And I know that Republicans and certainly President Trump has pointed to the Biden administration, and now Democrats are pointing back to President Trump doing this with putting, Kash Patel in at the FBI, and now Dan Bongino is the assistant director, but also specifying the case out of New York City with the mayor, Eric Adams, dropping that case. What do you make of all this?
I think it's chilling to think that the Justice Department was as weaponized as it was. And I don't want to go after Democrats for political reasons because we lose the country if we do that. We become just a big giant banana republic, honestly. So what we need to do is really ensure that there is a rule of law. And we, in our entire history, no president was ever indicted. Then suddenly President Trump gets indicted in infinite amount of times, it seemed. That's dangerous. And Hillary Clinton definitely could, very well may have. There's a potential that she committed crimes. But President Trump, after he won, said, you know what, we're just not going to pursue it for the sake of the country, because when you win and then if you prosecute the loser, that is banana republic. That mirrors that. And you have to tread very lightly. And I think most Americans agree. I mean, they elected a president that was political persecution. If President Trump wasn't a political figure, they wouldn't have taken up that case in New York City on how a billionaire spent 130 grand of his own money when the Democratic National Committee spent $1 million on the Steele dossier and then said it was legal expenses, and they got fined. And actually, their fine, Hillary's and their fine combined, were more than the 130 grand that Donald Trump spent his own money with. But they didn't get prosecuted. They got civil penalties. So, and then, the documents case, the president can declassify any document he wants, so long as it doesn't relate to exposing undercover CIA operatives or nuclear secrets. And then to sit there and indict him on things that he had the power to declassify is silly when you look at the other side of the ledger, Joe Biden was in possession of classified documents, and he was never, these documents that he was in possession of were gathered by him when he wasn't president. He didn't have the power to and the authority to declassify them. And they just said, well, we're just not going to pursue the case. So there's definitely was a double standard. We want to make sure there's one standard so it can be just, so we can have that rule of law, because that's really the foundation of our republic.
4th District Congressman Pat Fallon, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack. Take care. God bless.